From the Oregon State University Extension Service, this is Pollination, a podcast that tells the stories of researchers, land managers, and concerned citizens making bold strides to improve the health of pollinators. I'm your host, Dr. Adoni Melathopoulos, Assistant Professor in Pollinator Health in the Department of Horticulture. There are many things that delight me in this world, but one thing in particular has come to my attention is that there's a lot of interest among regular people in identifying insects and knowing more about their lives. And this has really exploded when it comes to pollinating insects. Now, we know from previous episodes it's particularly tricky identifying some of our pollinators. Some, like butterflies, are a little less difficult, but the bees are notoriously difficult to determine to species. As we heard on a previous episode with Dr. John Asher, there's a lot of new technology that's coming online, making it easier for people without formal training to be able to get into this gig. And today, I'm really delighted to feature one of the innovations that's coming online with Dr. Brian Speisman. Now, he's in the process of developing a machine learning mechanism that will identify bees. It's starting with bumblebees, and in this episode you're going to hear that he's looking for you to use this tool, which you can find linked in our show notes. And by getting lots of submissions in, he's hoping to train his algorithms to be able to do really remarkable work identifying bees, helping people who don't have the skills to really participate in bee survey. I also just want to make a shout out. We are still doing a podcast survey. This is a survey that helps us improve the podcast. You can find it at our website, pollinationpodcast.oregonstate.edu. And for people who submit survey results, we do send out a pack, which has got a ball cap and also a book for identification. And I want to announce that Corey Docho, I hope I pronounced your name right, Incarnation, Washington, is our current winner. So, Corey, it's on its way out to you. Thanks for taking time to complete the survey. And we're going to conclude the survey at the end of October. So please get your survey results in. Really helps us out. And without further ado, let's talk about Bee Machine with Dr. Brian Speisman today on Pollination. So on a previous episode we had with John Asher, he made the remark that bee research is on the cusp of where birding was in the 1970s, where surveying started to move into the realm of these highly motivated non-professionals who are kind of collecting bee records. Do you agree with this assessment? And tell us a little bit about your personal experiences working with enthusiastic native bee volunteers.
Yeah, so I do agree with it. I think it's a good observation. I think recently there's been a lot of interest in bees and pollinators in general, and I think it sounds like to me it seems like it's coming a lot from some of the troubles we've been seeing with honeybees, and I think this is it acts as sort of a gateway to the broader field of pollinators and bees in general. And so a lot of people, once they start realizing that bees are more than just honeybees, that there's 4,000 species of native bees in North America, people start to really get excited about that. Wow, I didn't know there was that many bees. And now that there are these online resources where people can post their pictures, ask questions, things like iNaturalist. There's Facebook groups where people can get involved with. There's Bumblebee Watch. There's some other sort of citizen science or community science organizations where people can get really involved and contribute, and they can feel like they're contributing to some of these really important data sets for monitoring bees and other organisms across the United States or in North America. So yeah, I think it's sort of starting to see that broad interest, and you can see it in sort of popular culture. So I think that it's going to be really good for some of creating interest and driving policy changes that are needed to combat a lot of the pollinator decline and bee decline in particular.
Yeah, it's true. I noticed that there's a number of Facebook groups that are devoted to just people posting pictures of native bees, and it's really wonderful because people from right across the U.S. are turning up some like remarkable bees that they're running into and they're seeing. There's a lot of eyes that are really looking and are getting increasingly sophisticated to looking for bees.
Yeah, definitely. And these observations are really important, especially for tracking endangered species like the rusty patch bumblebee. Trying to understand where the range is currently. How is it contracting? Still is it expanding? Are we seeing new pockets and new populations in places where we haven't seen them before, or places where we haven't seen them in a long time? Also just for monitoring those common species. It's important to still continue to see where the Bombus impatiens is, the common eastern bumblebee, one of the most, if not the most common species in North America. If we start to see declines in Bombus impatiens, then that's a real important signal that we need to see. So it's the whole gambit of the high diversity of bees all over the world that we need to be able to monitor more effectively, and we really wouldn't be able to do it with a lot of these enthusiasts that are contributing observations from literally all over the world.
Those are some great points. So even common bees, I was thinking on the West Coast, Bombus occidentalis used to be a very common bee, and now, at least in Oregon, you really have to go up into the mountains to be able to find, and the populations are very small. So that is a great example of creating a baseline so that we can, if we do see a decline, we can really measure it well. Well, so one thing that I'm really excited about, and I was really excited when I saw what you were working on, is machine learning in natural history. It's not new. Anybody who's used iNaturalist and has used that suggest species option has, learned that it's gotten pretty sophisticated. You go in, you take a picture of something, and it kind of understands the pattern, and I guess it recognizes. I use this for plant identification all the time because I'm not a very good plant person. Can you tell me about what are some of the problems these machine learning systems encounter when it comes to bees?
So machine learning and bees. So bees are a difficult taxa to get a handle on for anybody. Even the experts struggle with many of the many of the uncommon species, like in the Andrena dialectus. There's a lot of just very difficult species that are they're just hard to identify. Machine learning, I think, is a good tool in that it can sort of learn its own feature set on its own. If you have a training data set, you have a data set of images that for sure that they are all species A, and you have another set that are all species B. That's really all you need for the machine to figure out how to identify on its own what makes those different or what makes them similar, so that you can differentiate between the two. So it comes up with its own feature set that may or may not be anything like what a human observer would use to identify the bee. So all it's using is pixels, the digital numbers associated with the pixels, and some context within the image, and from that it uses that through this artificial neural network to generate these different scale features that it uses all of those, and it's for some people, it's a little bit of a black box, and so you don't know exactly what the features are that it's using to identify a species of bee, but and a lot of times they're really abstract, and so it's not like we really wouldn't be able to. So it's not like it's saying, oh, this one has 3 submarginal cells and this one has 2. It doesn't know what a marginal cell is. It doesn't know anything like that. It just knows that there's some pattern in the pixels that it could recognize. And so with iNaturalist, it's using, there are a set of models out there that have been developed by different organizations, like Google has developed some models. There are these models that are developed to identify and differentiate sort of everyday items like dogs versus cats, spoons, cars, things like that, and it does pretty well on those types of problems. And so the models for bees and this, the ones that I'm using and the ones that iNaturalist I'm sure is using are developed from those models, and they're sort of retrained to identify bees and plants and other organisms that iNaturalist does. And so when it is coming up with a sort of suggestion for what your image might be, the reason why iNaturalist doesn't do quite so good a job on species level bees is because it's I think the way that their models do it, and I'm not exactly sure how their models work, but their models are designed to look at a whole range of taxa, so like insects, mammals,
right.
fish, plants, and so it's using this very big model, and so it doesn't have the resolution within the model to really get down and know at the species level what a particular bee might be. Whereas something like in the work that I've done, it's focused exclusively on bumblebees in North America at this point. And so my model is very specific to this sort of taxonomic subset, and so it can get a little bit better, or actually quite a bit better, I think, than what iNaturalist is showing on their website. I'm sure they could get much better if they really focused on particular taxa at a time, it's just not totally clear what how their models are actually working, but that's sort of my guess.
Okay, so I've invited you here to talk about this specific initiative that you have, the Bee Machine initiative, or platform, and I guess the key thing here is that by really kind of focusing in on bees rather than the broad range of every creature from snails to carabid beetles to that, you're able to really kind of give that training just a lot more examples. So tell us a little bit about what's involved with that. How do you train a machine to recognize bumblebees as you're doing?
Well, it's on my end, it's pretty simple. So I'm sort of building off the hard work of a lot of other people, people that have developed the machine learning models, people that like the everyday people that are going out and capturing these images, the taxonomists that are doing the important work of not only identifying the bees but telling us what actually makes a species a species. So all of this information I take the images on iNaturalist. I take images from Bumblebee Watch, from Bug Guide. I'm starting to get images from the Wisconsin Bumblebee Brigade. And so I take all of those images, and they've all been identified, many of them are identified by experts, and some of them, for example, from iNaturalist, are agreed on by multiple people, and so some of which are the same experts that are identifying for some of these other groups. And so I'm taking these sort of pre-identified images, and I feed them into my neural network model, and that's really all I need to do. Is I need to tell it, this image is from species A, and I feed it through the network, and it when the information gets passed through the network, I know that it's supposed to be species A, but the network may have told me that, oh no, this was species B. And so then it goes back, it passes back through the network, it rearranges and sort of remodels the links within that network, the weights of those links, and so it might change the network in such a way that when it runs through again, it gets a little bit closer to the correct species, and it makes that pass back and forth many, many times, and eventually the model arrives at the correct solution. And so if you do that for many, many images of all of the species that you're interested in, and you pass those images back and forth through the network, and that's sort of the training process of making those weights, those connections between nodes within the network, making them have the correct parameter values to give you the correct answer. And then once you've trained the model, then you take brand new images that were never used to train the model, and feed those through and see if you got the correct answer. And so that's the real test, is to see if you can use brand new images to classify the image or identify the image of the bumblebee.
Okay, and so you've been doing this. I noticed, and we'll put the link in the show notes. There's some great tips on how to take a picture of a bumblebee to be able to really optimize this machine learning platform to recognize the bee. But you've also done some of this validation and work, which is up on the website. Tell us how it's faring, this process of kind of going back, no, that's not that, and then it goes back and learns. How's the machine doing?
It's doing pretty good. There's a lot of room for improvement, and we're working on that sort of constantly. So right now, overall, it will classify. So there's about, depending on who you ask, and what day it is, there's about 45 species of bees in North America, or bumblebees in North America. And so that's what Bee Machine is working on right now, is working on identifying bumblebees. Eventually, we want to get to a broader range of bees. So, the dream way down the line is a sort of a general bee classifier. So we're focusing on North American bumblebees just as sort of a way to get a handle on the process. That's where most of the data is right now. So it's just sort of, we're taking the low-hanging fruit. So of those 45 bumblebee species, we have enough data to train a model to classify 35 of those 45 species. And so those are basically the 35 most common bumblebees in North America. So it would be, a general user would not likely come across those remaining 10 species. So, and those tend to be the sort of Arctic species, species that occurred where there just aren't a lot of people. And so that's one of the reasons why there aren't a lot of images of those, is because there just aren't a lot of people around to capture those images. And so of those 35 species, our overall accuracy of the model is about 91%. And so that means if you go out into the field and you take a picture of the first bumblebee you see, the model will give you the correct identity about 91% of the time. And that's for the top 1%. So the way the model works is it gives you the top predicted species, but it also gives you the second most likely, the third most likely, all the way down to the bottom. And so it sort of ranks the likelihood of all of the species that you're going to see. And so in our web app at Bee Machine, we give you the top 3 most likely species, and the top 3 accuracy is about 97, 98%. So if you go out into the field and you capture an image of the first bumblebee you see, our model will be about 97% accurate that it will be one of those 3 species.
Wow. Well, that's fantastic, and I guess some are hard to tell apart. I was really surprised, some that are, Griciacolis and Impatiens kind of look the same, but it easily can discern them. But there's stuff like here on the West Coast, we've got a terrible complex with Caliginosus and Vozesensky, where they're hard to tell apart, and I noticed they kind of overlap. But I imagine at some level this gets you through, as you say, 90% of the differentiation, allowing you to really kind of take the load off of the taxonomists who don't want to see another very, very common bumblebee. They can.
And you're right. It does really well at some species. Like, for example, Bombus affinis is the rusty patch bumblebee is one of the highest accuracies of all species. And so I think
how great!
Yeah, and I think that's really great, as for conservation. So if you get you plug a bee into Bee Machine and it tells you that it's Bombus affinis, it's going to be Bombus affinis, around 96% of the time. So you can be pretty sure that if you get that answer, that's what it is. And so for other things, like you mentioned, some of the common species like Bombus grisiacolis, Bombus Bombus impatiens, Bombus bimaculatus. Those are three species that are often, the sort of the new people to the field. They can, depending on the angle of the photo, those can be confused sometimes. And so things like that are really great because it takes the load off. It can take the load off taxonomists who can identify those with very little trouble. So having that sort of load off allows them to focus on the more difficult species, the species of greater concern. So I'm really happy about that aspect of it.
Well, tell us a bit. I just learned about it just a couple months ago. When was it released, and are you getting any feedback from people who are at that stage of just learning their bumblebees on how they're finding it?
So I'm not getting a lot of feedback at this point. It's I'm seeing some use, and so I sort of monitor traffic on the website, and I'm seeing use all over the United States and Canada where the bumblebees are occur my model is able to identify. But I'm seeing people from all over the world just sort of checking in. I think there's a lot of curiosity just to what's the deal with this? Is this really happening? And I'm getting it. I've had a little bit of feedback, so sort of personal feedback. You mentioned some Facebook pages, and people are posting bees to it, and so I've sort of snuck onto some of these like one of the Facebook pages, and I helped identify some of the images up there, and there was one woman who had a picture of a Bombus affinis, a queen rusty patch.
Oh wow!
And she was had planted this pollinator garden and was specifically for attracting. I think she lived in Minnesota, so it was specifically for attracting rusty patch, and so she was very happy to know that she was not only attracting the workers, but there was queens, and so I think people are starting to use it. I've got a little bit of feedback about people going back through old photos that they weren't able to identify on their own, and plugging it into Bee Machine, and it was they was sort of between one or two or three species that they couldn't really differentiate, but Bee Machine was really strongly favoring one of those species, and so it gave them a little more confidence that it was species A instead of species B.
That's fantastic, and that's a great story. I love the idea of the gardener in Minnesota kind of getting that gratification and being able to know, oh, I am achieving, what I set out to do just by using this device. How do people get images in? How do people use it? It's on the website, right? So you're loading images in.
Right. So at this point, it's a pretty simple interface. We're working on making the user interface better all the time. So it's at beemachine.org, and people you just type in beemachine.org, go to visit the website. There is a little bit of instructions on the website, so it tells you which species it's able to identify. It tells you a little bit about you have to crop the image before you upload it. That's one of the things where it's a little bit of a hassle right now, but it's one of the things we're working on to be able just to upload an image and not have to worry about cropping it. So if you crop your image right close to the bee, that reduces all of the extraneous pixels in the image, and it can really focus on the pixels associated with the bee, and not all of that extra stuff in the background. Once you've uploaded it, you just press the upload button, and the next page gives you the predictions, and it tells you the top 3 predictions along with the associated prediction probabilities. So usually if you have what I found through testing it myself over and over again is that if you have a good really strongly favoring one species over the other two, like anywhere from like 95% or above, then I found that it's almost always that that's the true identity, and the other ones are just there because those are the next closest species, even though they may be very far from the actual identity. and so then there's you can click a link to just do a simple internet search on each of the species that comes up, so it can sort of jumpstart your research into saying, okay, is this actually the species that it tells me it is? So it's kind of simple at this point, and we are actively working on making the user interface more a little bit simpler, and providing more educational information on what kind of bees you're actually seeing.
There's some great information on there, and I really think for if there's anything that sort of marks a bee enthusiast, it's really wanting to see the next thing and really kind of be on board early. And so this is a great opportunity for people who are around the U.S. Because I can imagine their information helps improve the program and its usability, and so they're actually contributing in some small way to making it even better each month.
Yeah, definitely, and that's going to be much more true in the future. So one of the things we're planning on is actually using the images that people upload to sort of continuously retrain the model. So the more images people upload, the better the model will be in terms of the classification. So the feedback I receive is great, but then eventually it's going to be directly contributing to the quality of the model. And I'd also like to plug in this sort of machine learning capability into broader monitoring projects. So it's going to, I think it'll be really helpful for getting the broader community of bee enthusiasts, researchers out there able to quickly and accurately get a good picture of what's going on with bees.
Well, let's take a quick break, and I want to actually pick up on that point, just how machine learning can be sort of part of the larger division of labor in terms of really surveying our bees across the state. So let's take a quick break, and we'll be right back. Okay, so as we're back, and so I really was curious. You mentioned earlier that the machine is just looking at pixels and is just picking things up. It has not gone through the classical keys, the genus or species keys. So as a taxonomist, are you finding that what the machine is picking up on are features that you'd never occurred to you as being diagnostic?
Yeah, so it's interesting. So small clarification. I wouldn't really consider myself a taxonomist. I'd consider myself more of an ecologist that really relies on taxonomists, and I'm sort of an amateur taxonomist that can get myself into trouble if I'm not careful.
Okay.
So with the machine, it is definitely picking up on. It's definitely making similar mistakes that a human observer would make. It thinks that the machine is thinking that Bombus impatiens is more similar looking to Bombus bimaculatus than it is to Bombus pennsylvanicus. So it's seeing that bees that we think would be more similar looking, species that we think would be similar are similar, and species that we think would be different are different. The particular characters that it's using is it's kind of a mystery to me. I haven't dug too deep into the layers in the neural network, which can tell you which what kind of features it's looking at in these different layers. And so as you move through a network, you start with the early layers are very fine features. Like say, for example, you were trying to identify faces. The first layers would be looking at fine scale features like eyes and noses and ears. And then the middle layers would be looking at uh, more developed things like combinations of eyes and like your like parts of your face, and then the very end would be looking at the whole face in general. And so that's what that means for bees. I haven't gone into sort of dug into the model to see how that's coming out. I did do that a little bit for a previous model when I was looking at just at bee wings, and that was interesting because you can take the image that you plug in and then sort of overlay a heat map on it. And the heat map tells you the areas that were more important than other areas for the machine to classify the image. So like a bright red area would be very important for the machine, and then a blue area would be not so important. It doesn't really use that area. And so the interesting thing about that was that it was on just this image of a wing, it was focusing on an area of the wing that a taxonomist probably wouldn't use to identify what that was. It wasn't looking at the curvature of the marginal cells and the number of submarginal cells. It was looking at the leading edge of the wing. And for this species or this genus, which was I think it was Agapossum in this example, it was just looking at something that a taxonomist just wouldn't use. And so in that case, that's sort of an example of how the machine generates its own feature set. It doesn't necessarily use what we use, which could be important down the road, or it could be at least useful down the road to help us understand when two species are actually different, based on these visual features, these morphological features. So that's definitely something that needs to be worked out, but it's a possibility that it could be useful for differentiating species, or maybe finding characters that weren't noticeable before, but maybe we just didn't notice them, or it could just be something in the pixels, something that we'd never be able to see at all.
It reminds me, remember back in the Cold War, there was like it was after the Cold War, they had that guy play the IBM computer in chess. It was like, the computer was like, oh yeah, I can hold my own. And it raises the question, there has been this shortage of taxonomy, native bee taxonomy across the U.S. We really have not invested a lot in making sure those positions are funded and people are there. And I can imagine this kind of technology could complement their work. Like there's a way in which this, how do you envision that kind of division of labor between professional taxonomists who are constantly working at the very fine gradations with the machine learning?
Yeah, I think they could work nicely together. So this technology is definitely won't replace taxonomists. We need taxonomists to help us understand differences between species, to tell us, help revise our understanding of what makes this population different from that population. Are they different species? And what makes them different? That's something that at least now this machine learning technology can't do. What it can do is take that information from taxonomists, and once a taxonomist or an expert has identified a bee in an image, identified the species of bee, then we can use that image to train a model that non-experts can use to identify their own species. So in that case, I think it could be really useful and really important for sort of taking the load off of taxonomists in terms of making it so they can reduce their time identifying the common species and focus more on the more challenging species. And so it's I think it could be very complementary to what they're doing. So if a taxonomist is really focused on some aspect of taxonomic research, working on a revision, if they are spending more of their time identifying common species that get sent to them, then it takes away from some of their research. But then again, you mentioned that there's a lack of funding for taxonomists, and so they get a lot of their funding from identifying these these bee specimens that get sent to them. So this is not meant to replace them. I think that this technology is meant to help lessen the burden on them. There's also just more specimens, more images out there than they can handle right now.
Yeah.
And especially on talking with people at Bumblebee Watch, they have a big backlog of images that have yet to be identified, and those taxonomists, those experts there are donating a lot of their time to do this, and it can be a challenge for them to get through a lot of these, literally thousands of images to be identified. And so if that could lessen their load in that regard, it would make more data available for researchers to understand trends in bee population dynamics, and trends in bee range shifts and things like that. And so, more data on some of these big sort of community science driven data sets like Bumblebee Watch, iNaturalist, Bug Guide. So it would provide more data to understand bees. It would provide sort of relief to taxonomists to focus on the things that they need to get done, and it could also be really useful as an educational tool for people, and get people more interested in contributing some of these images. If they get feedback right away on their their identity, the identity of the bee that they upload, then it could help bring a little more enthusiasm to the field, and make people feel like they're contributing a little bit more.
Fantastic. Well, let's take a quick break. We'll come back. We are our last segment where we ask you what do we ask you? We ask you for some recommendations for our listeners. Geez, I'm out of it today. Okay, so we'll be back in just a sec. Okay, we're back. You're on the hot seat now. We got 3 questions for you. First one's a book recommendation.
So the book that I've been using a lot to help develop my models, develop my understanding of bumblebees in North America is the Williams Bumblebees of North America. It's a great sort of field guide, a great tool to take out, and I've really used it to help with my understanding of bumblebee taxonomy, and where these species live, what makes them different from other bumblebees.
It's a fantastic book. It's really affordable. Anybody can pick it up, and it really does kind of show you. I guess this would be one of the tricky things is, it's one thing to, take queens and be able to recognize them, but the males get to be a little bit hard to identify, and the guide has some great, allows you to sort of see the color patterns, but it also has that fantastic at the back genitalia descriptor. So if you're really hardcore, you can, really a good way to identify males is with those genitalia images. Okay, well, that's a great recommendation. Thanks for recommending it, and I really encourage people to pick it up if you're interested in bumblebees. It's a great complement as you're kind of using Bee Machine to learn. Have your copy of Williams beside you. All right, our next question is there a go-to tool that you really rely on?
Yeah, so I usually, when I'm out in the field sampling, I usually have 2 tools. That one tool, is sort of the go-to for everybody, is just a collecting net. But the other thing that I use quite a lot is what I call a VBAC. I don't know if that's what everybody else calls it, but it's basically a modified dust buster where you can use it to suck up bees, and it nicely brings them into little capsules that you can keep bees separate, or load up a new capsule and start catching more bees. So that's a great tool that I use whenever I'm out in the field catching bees.
I suppose I was out with Rich Hatfield once with the with all the bumblebee watches across the U.S. And for them, getting they actually cool their bees down before they take a picture. And I imagine if you have something like a bee vac and a little ice chest, you can get some really crisp images for submitting.
Yeah, it's great. Yeah, you suck it up, you pop out the little capsule, and you can put it in the ice chest and cool it down for a few minutes, and yeah, it's great. I use it for sampling, and it's great to keep, if you want to keep observations separate, like you're focusing on one host plant, and you just get all the bees into that capsule from that host plant over some period of time, and then you switch to another one, you pop in a new capsule, and that way you can keep all of your samples together nicely.
Fantastic. Well, our last question for you is, do you have a favorite pollinator species?
I like a lot of pollinators. I think, it's not a very original one, but kind of boring. But I really like Bombus impatiens, the common eastern bumblebee. It's everywhere. It's easy to identify. It's just sort of a comfortable, known bee.
It's a great one. I always love having bees that a beginner can identify right away, because it really does help your confidence. You're all nervous, and he's like, I can tell a species. I got it. And that's one that you can really, probably was one of the first species when I was in Prince Edward Island doing my graduate work that I really kind of cottoned onto as the first one that I noticed as distinct. Well, thank you so much for taking time. We're really looking forward to the development of this technology. I think it's going to really help a lot for a lot of people who are just starting out and trying to learn how to identify bumblebees. And it sounds like it's going to have some great impact in terms of being able to survey bees.
Yeah, I hope so. It's going to be, as I mentioned before, we're developing it all the time. We have a mobile app in the works that is, people are going to be able to take out on their mobile phone and take images and quickly, get answers back. And we hope to link it with databases so that you can use it for field work. Link it to your database associated with your own project. Link the modeling structure in with sort of field deployable hardware that you can put out for a sort of automated monitoring over long periods of time. So we have a lot in the works here, and we're pretty excited to see where it leads.
Well, thank you so much. I'm so excited. I'm looking forward to catching up with you next year, maybe. Good things come along. Take care. Thank you so much for listening. The show is produced by Quinn Sin and Neal, who's a student here at OSU in the New Media Communications program, and the show wouldn't even be possible without the support of the Oregon Legislature, the Foundation for Food and Agricultural Research, and Western SARE. Show notes with links mentioned on each episode are available on the website, which is at pollination.podcast.oregonstate.edu. I also love hearing from you, and there's several ways to connect with me. The first one is you can visit the website and leave an episode-specific comment. You can suggest a future guest or topic, or ask a question that could be featured in a future episode. But you can do the same things on Twitter, Instagram, or Facebook by visiting the Oregon Bee Project. Thanks so much for listening, and see you next week.